C2E2. I'm Courtney Enlow. I'm the associate editor of SYFY WIRE Fangirls. That is SYFY's female-focused vertical celebrating women's and non-binary voices across the nerdverse. I am so happy to be here right now with artist Jill Thompson. You know her from Sandman, from Scary Godmother. She is going to be doing some art for us. So what are you going to be doing for us today?
Well, I thought I would work on some Scary Godmother because it shows how I work in a style on a character that's my own, but it's indicative of the watercolor work I do in all of the things that I do comic book form.
So I'm going to be annoying you the whole time that you're doing this art. So what is it about the watercolor style that really kind of speaks to you? What is it you like doing it?
I guess because I get to control everything. I get to, in essence, pencil, ink with paint, and then do all the color. And I have a vision in my head that sometimes when you're working on a comic with a bunch of other people, not that I don't like the work that they do, but sometimes the styles don't always match up.
Yeah.
Or you have an idea of how you want something to go.
A creative person who loves control. Never have I heard of such a person.
I like to do all the jobs. Plus, I wanted to be a cartoonist I wanted to be a person that was known for the thing that they did and the style that they had. You know, like Frank Miller, Mike Mignola, or somebody that did everything themselves. Jaime Hernandez.
When you do characters that have like an existing history, like Wonder Woman, I know you've worked on Swamp Thing. What do you bring to those characters and to that style that's very much your own, but still inspired by what's come before?
Well, with Wonder Woman, I worked on it twice. First when I started working for DC Comics, and then just recently when I wrote and illustrated the graphic novel Wonder Woman, the True Amazon. So that was me doing kind of my own take on her origin. And I think what I brought to that was a Wonder Woman that was a little less than perfect, which was the thing about Wonder Woman that had always kind of bothered me, which I thought was perfectly executed in the Wonder Woman film, because I thought, well, how could she grow up on an island full of doting aunties and grandmas and not become totally spoiled, like a haughty prince in one of those fairy tales where you have to switch them out with a pauper so they learn the lesson about how to be, you know, the noble person that they are. And then Gal Gadot was Wonder Woman, and they showed me exactly how you do that.
You also gave her your own hair, which I think was really wonderful.
What about my hair?
I said you gave her your hair, essentially.
Well, no, I gave her Greek hair. She has Greek hair. George Perez gave her Greek hair. I like her to have Greek hair. And I know why everyone else does not draw her with Greek hair is because it really is hard to do over and over and over and over again in a timely manner. So,
hard to draw curly hair, have curly hair, it's all just a lot.
Yes, it is. But thankfully on the page there is no humidity where Wonder Woman lives ever, so she doesn't have giant troll hair.
Themyscira is free of humidity and men.
It is like New Zealand. It is a cooler climate rainforest.
So let's talk a little bit about Sandman. What do you think it is about your style that kind of blended so well with Neil Gaiman and his characters and all of that?
Well,
it really is beautiful, the work that you did on that.
Thank you. I did not paint that. That was before I had developed this painted style.
But you penciled that, right?
Yes, and I inked some of it every once in a while. That's when I started getting real control-y about things, because I guess Neil has mentioned that he thought I brought a lot of subtle acting to scenes that warranted really quiet stuff. And that's one of the things I pride myself on, is making sure that you can tell what's happening in a comic without necessarily having to read the word balloons. Because to me, the word balloons are like the icing on the most delicious cake you ever have had. Too little, and the cake might not live up to what you expected, but then too much, and then it's too sweet and you don't want to finish it. So to me, the art is the great cake underneath, and then the writing is an accent, because when you're collaborating with somebody and they're writing, they are writing the art direction for you. So you shouldn't have to explain what you see. So you should be able to look at the comic first and understand what's going on, and then read something that's bringing more emotion to it, or bringing you information that you can't get by just looking at the pictures.
First, I'm so hungry for cake now. So thank you for that.
Is there a cupcake vendor here? I think that is something this convention
it's
sorely is lacking.
It's a missed opportunity.
That's right. Next year, cupcake vendors everywhere.
Just put the C in C2E2 as cupcake.
Oh my God.
For it.
I think that's a brand new way of marketing the show.
So let's talk a little bit more about that subtle acting. Is that purely facial expressions, body language? Like how do you view the acting in your art?
I think it is a mix of subtle facial expression or massive facial expression. You know, I mean, we're not animators, but we're key animators all the time. So you don't do the in-between bits to tell a comic book story. You do, you know, the wind-up, the follow-through. You don't throw a ball like that because it doesn't show you the action of the throw. So we do all the big things that would be filled in then by animation. And that's the same with expressions. If someone's having a really exciting thing, you don't go, that's great. You're like, oh, this is fantastic. And then there's a word balloon that has, hopefully, lettering that also shows exactly how excited someone is with a word font inside that will do the same thing. So that really emphasizes what the story is about.
How does that translate to Scary Godmother? When you're doing something for kids, do you do it a little bit differently, or do you kind of still adopt that same style?
Actually, when I was doing Scary Godmother, I was trying to entertain myself first, but make something accessible for kids. So I think like a G-rated thing in the spirit of old Bugs Bunny cartoons, or a G-rated film from, you know, back in the black and white movie days, where you could have incredibly sad or terrible things that happen, but they just weren't gratuitously shown. So your brain fills in a lot of things that might be sad or terrible or horrible, where you just don't graphically show that. And I like comedy, and I like monsters, and I like things that are fun. And it just kind of, Scary Godmother just kind of mixed up all the things that I love, plus painting.
Aside from trying to entertain yourself, what kind of brought about that character? What made you decide to do this specific story for that specific audience?
It was a happy accident, because at the time I was jumping from comic book story to comic book story at Vertigo, and I didn't at one point I went to jump to the next project, and there was no next project, so I had time to try and find other things to do, not because I wanted to, but because there was no available work. And I was doing some work in advertising and some work in gaming, and at the same time my first niece was born, and I wanted to make a present for the baby when she was born, and I was a lot more goth than I am now. So except that I do wear my black motorcycle jacket all the time now again. And I thought about myself standing in the back of a Catholic church with big crazy hair and black everything in my black motorcycle jacket, and I thought, I'd be a pretty scary godmother. And when I said that, I actually saw a vision of like this little witch fairy, Tinkerbell style lady, and sketched her out. And then I started, the next day I drew her, she pretty much looked exactly like the way I draw her now. And I didn't set out to do anything, but it just kind of happened that way. And then after that, I had this character, and then I thought, well, who is she? And she's a scary godmother. What does she do? Well, she teaches you that it's okay to be scared, or that sometimes spooky things are really cool. And oh my gosh, I could do all the Halloween things I love. Well, where does she live? In a haunted house. Who lives there? Oh, the monster in the basement or under the bed. Oh, and the skeleton in the closet. And things just kept rolling by themselves.
Right.
So I finally actually had a world instead of just some doodles on paper, which I've done throughout my comics career, drawn interesting things that were maybe cool costumes on superheroes, or steampunky looking things, or some other monster or something, but nothing ever came of it. It was just stuff you fill your sketchbook with. This one started making up stories by herself all the time, and so did the rest of her friends. And then I realized finally, oh my gosh, I actually have my own thing.
Right, yeah.
I should do something with it.
One thing we do at Fangirls is we have Witchy Wednesday. So every Wednesday we do something about
My favorite day
witches in, in genre, in history, all that. And one of the things that we like to talk about is the fact that, witches for a long time are kind of it was just the way that people viewed women and as these like scary things. And if they had their own thoughts and opinions and attitudes, they were, witches.
Right?
Burn them. What is it that you like about witches and that idea? Because we love witches at Fangirls.
Well, I grew up having kids go dun, 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 at me all the time.
Kids suck.
So I felt like, and adults actually, and it still happens every time I'm on my bike wearing black. Believe you me, I get a lot of that. But I think it's funny, and I like it, and I'm happy to be witchy. I've always liked witchy stuff. I don't know. The idea of magic is really great to me, and also the idea of I've always liked Halloween, so I've liked that aspect of witchcraft. But to me, it's kind of close to the way I view how we should take care of the earth.
Yes. Yeah.
So I'm kind of connected to that part of older.
Like all elements of what makes a witch.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are you doing right now? What are you doing?
What am I doing right now? Well, I'm doing a bust of Scary Godmother. So the first thing I do is I pencil out the thing that I want to draw.
Mm-hmm.
And if I was doing this for a comic and there was any lettering, I would sketch in lightly where I wanted the lettering to go. Then I would scan it in to my computer for a letter to do on overlay. Then I would erase all the letters, tighten up all the pencils, tape up all the panel borders, and then start painting. So I go through and I start just filling in all the colors lightly. And if there was a background here, I would do a background first, but I didn't think we would have time for that. And then I go through and fill in every place that has this kind of the same color. And then after this dries, which it's not dry yet, so I can't go back into it. That's why I can't go back into some of the same areas. Then I would go through and use a darker color of the color I'm using with a paintbrush of paint. It's not ink or anything, or pencil or anything like that. And then I go and ink a line or use a holding line to create that comic book style effect.
When you're writing Scary Godmother stories, what do you kind of come through first, as an artist or as a writer? Does the story come first or the art?
When I first started, I was so used to collaborating with other people. I had a story in my head, but I didn't know how to write it. So I drew all the pictures first as layouts, and then I went back and wrote like art direction and story so someone else could see what I wanted to do. And then I went back and redrew it. But I've learned now how to kind of write an outline for myself, and sometimes paragraphs, because I'm the person that I'm working with, it's kind of easier than writing for somebody else, because I can use a lot of shorthand. Mm-hmm. So sometimes I just write an outline of all the actions I want, and then with little dialogue around it. And then other times I'll write just a paragraph of everything that happens on the page, and then break it down as I do it, because I know what I want to do. But if I write for somebody else, I will write full script style, the way that you write for DC Comics or a screenplay or something like that. I'm not sure if Marvel still relies heavily on plot style scripts, but I can do that as well. I think it's kind of good to be an artist first before you write, because you can easily write the art direction for somebody else. A lot of times I've dealt with writers who don't understand how many actions they might be writing.
Right.
And it's not seasoned comic book writers, but it's people that sometimes come from other media, like television or especially film or books even, because they're writing something that they consider one panel, but it's really like a crane shot coming in over a town and then zooming in, a close-up of a guy looking at his watch, and then they think that's panel one. I'm like, that's 5 panels of story, or 3 if you really want to break it down.
You can see it in a feasible way.
Right.
Yeah.
So I feel like somebody needs to sit some people down and say, this is how you do it, so someone can draw a comic from it. Mm-hmm. This is great, but you just have to learn the language of writing a comic or the format of writing a comic, the same way you would have to learn the format for writing a screenplay, where every page equals 1 minute of screen time. So you can't write, you know, these super long things that are going to take 5 minutes and expect it to be like on 1 page.
What's your favorite character that you've drawn that you didn't create? We're taking Scary Godmother off the table.
Delirium.
Delirium.
Yeah. She's
What was
my
it about
favorite.
that? Yeah.
Pardon?
What was it about that you liked?
I think she evolved so much. There was a time when Neil Gaiman and I were doing a signing tour together, and the way that I react to things, we were walking in a hotel room with some, or not a room, but like through a hotel to get to the signing thing with the people that were hosting us. And Neil's walking very stoically down the aisle, and I'm like running my hands along the flocked wallpaper and like talking about how good it feels and how really interesting things are, and can you smell this kind of thing? And I went, oh my God, we're Delirium and Sandman. Like, oops, I've become the thing that I'm drawing, even though it has nothing to do with me.
Is that a thing though that happens where, because you hear about writers talk about how they kind of fall in love with these characters or become these characters, but as you're drawing them, do you have that kind of same relationship with what you're drawing or what you're coloring? And
well, I care very much about everything that I do. When I illustrate Beasts of Burden, I mean, I've cried while I've worked on that because I care about the characters, or I've helped paste something that's really, really sad. I mean, there's so much sad stuff that happens in that comic. But I feel like if I can move myself to tears, hopefully I've moved you to tears.
Right, yeah.
Which means that I'm doing my job as a storyteller.
Did you always like comics, or did your art just lend itself to that? So you were comics first before you were art, or?
I always liked comics.
That's awesome. What was your favorite?
Well, I worked my way up from Snoopy in the newspaper to Archie comics to superhero comics to all alternative comics to every comic I could get my hands on from any country that made comics, and then making comics.
Right, yeah.
So,
how did you get into the comics field?
get into the comics field? Perseverance. I think a little bit of it had to do with the fact that like there were very few women doing this when I first started, so it was almost easier to get someone to look at my portfolio because I was that girl that wanted to draw comics.
Right, yeah.
Have you seen that girl that wants to draw comics? It's like, oh yes, I have seen the girl that wants to draw comics.
Yeah.
She has her portfolio over there. Did you see her? It's like, yes. Oh, I saw her earlier today, because there was never more than one of us at a convention at the same time. So when, you know, maybe I just stuck out for the, you know, it's like her art is getting better, you know, like, because it's like, did you see the guy with glasses and a flannel shirt that wants to draw comics? Which one of them, you know, because that was everybody else.
Narrow it down to
was
the A's,
there.
the B's.
Right.
Now you're from here, right?
Yep.
Or you live here, yeah?
Yep, I am still from here.
Still here?
Yep.
Was that an impediment to getting into the comics field, or can you kind of do that anywhere?
You can live anywhere and work in comics. I went to the American Academy of Art, which is an art school here in Chicago. It's a trade school, or I don't know, is it called a trade school? Well, now it's an accredited school, but when I went there, it was a trade school. And I learned everything that they had to teach. Alex Ross went there, a lot of artists who are here, Doug Klauba, Bill Reinhold, Mitch O'Connell, Jason Seiler, Anthony Kosar, who won the Face Off. He went there too. I don't think they taught that there, but I mean, he took all of illustration and painting and every other course and just kind of was awesome at everything, and then went and did cool special effects. So we went there, and I just learned everything I could possibly learn about art rules, color theory, and applied it to the medium that I loved. And then once I went there, I started getting jobs. So I went from being like a fan who really wanted to draw to somebody who was going to apply those skills to doing the thing that I liked, and it paid off because there was a big difference in the amount of people that were interested in hiring me before I went to school and after I went to school. or while I was going to school, actually, even.
Aside from just a love of comics, a love of art, what else kind of inspires you and inspires your work?
What inspires me? Oh my gosh, everything. My phone has like 46,000 photos on it because there's something I see that's like, look how the light hits that, I have to paint that, or look at the way this pattern is, or that's an interesting tree, I'm gonna use that later. I'm inspired by meeting people. I'm inspired by, I do a lot of things, I make a lot of stuff. I'm not a very good person who sits around and does nothing. I have a hard time relaxing, so I'm inspired by cooking and sword fighting and Bowie knife fighting and gardening and kayaking and all sorts of things.
Question, can Scary Godmother take up a Bowie knife? Just a hobby.
Of course, she'd be much better than I am right now.
Recreational Bowie knifing.
That's right. She'd be much better than I am right now because she has magic. She could be faster than me.
Was it important to you to impart some of those lessons that this series teaches kids, like how it's okay to be scared, how it's okay to be different? Was that always important to you?
You know, there are a lot of things that are in Scary Godmother that I didn't intend, but are there. So I guess they kind of came out by accident, but I've had more than one person tell me they really liked how none of the characters judge each other for being different. And I guess that's just like how I am with people, so I wasn't doing it to make a point of anything. I was just having the characters treat their friends the way I treat my friends, or people that I meet.
You really have just kind of created your own ideal world.
Like I
Replete
said,
with monsters.
I was creating something for my own enjoyment first, and it just happened to have a lot of extra things in it.
Yeah.
Oops. I want to make
How
sure.
are we doing now? We got those. We got that.
We
got that bold lip going.
That's right. I want to make sure that I don't mess this up and I don't paint on some. So this would be like me inking, like where someone else would use India ink. I'm just using a darker. Of course, this makes everything I do take 10 times longer because I don't just put a black line around everything. I'm putting a green line around the parts where she's kind of lightly tinged green in every place. And then I'll have to wipe my brush out, and then I'll go through and I'll do like, okay, for up here, I'll do purple.
It's so cool, the dimension that watercolor gives to like her skin, her clothes, her hair. It's just really cool.
It adds a little extra.
Yeah.
It's kind of more traditional, like anime or like cell vinyl illustrating, because I would put a little bit more shadow on some of the stuff, like on certain sides, but not everything is completely dry. Because I like flat color a lot, because of course those are the comics I grew up reading.
Right.
So I'm kind of fond of something that has, so you can see, so you can move your eye around the page the way that the artist might have intended with their line drawing. I like computer coloring. I don't know how to do it yet. One day, when I have time to figure out how to do it, I will apply it. This is a little thicker line than I would usually do, but we'll see what happens.
Right now, I'm literally just watching this because it's really fascinating. It's just really cool.
Also, now would be the time. The one thing that computer colorists don't have to worry about is accidentally dropping this brush and having it roll across the thing that you painted, which then you have to either figure out how to fix, change, or cut out and start over. But then I also don't accidentally undo an entire page because I forgot to save it or something, which I've heard has happened.
Has that kind of had to make you like good at like improvising and just making the most of these little oopsies?
Then you're like, oh well, this page will be mixed media now because I'm going to have to go over that with some opaque paint because I accidentally put a big blue line across her face.
You talked
and
about
either this becomes a thing that's in shadow now, or it does not.
Yeah, because you talked about control.
Yep.
And how that's important, but it seems like this has some possibilities for losing control a little bit and then kind of making the best of it.
Well, the thing I'm a very patient person and a completely impatient person. So watercolor is really suited for me. It dries really fast, but not so fast that I can't manipulate it in the way that I want. But it's not like oil paint where it never dries and I can't seem to make it do what I want, or if things blend that I don't want them to blend. And it's not completely fast drying like acrylics, which dry before you put the next brush stroke down sometimes. So this one I can go back in and like add paint and mix things.
So much for being with us and for arting for us. Everyone at home, you can follow along with SYFY. Hashtag C2E2, hashtag It's a Fan Thing on Twitter. Thank you so much. Coming up next, we've got the wrap-up show, and we are so excited to wrap things up with you today, and we'll see you tomorrow.